Similarities between Mozart and Beethoven. Mozart and Beethoven are among the most celebrated composers in the classical world. Not only music but their personal lives continue to fascinate and delight us. The contribution of these musical geniuses was unparalleled during their lifetimes. This article will explore the similarities between these two composers and reveal a few unheard facts about them. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born in Salzburg, Austria, in 1756. Ludwig van Beethoven followed around 14 years later, in 1770. Unlike Mozart, Beethoven's birthplace was in Bonn, closer to the Netherlands than Austria, but still had strong political and cultural connections to Vienna. Beethoven and Mozart had different upbringings that we believe played a key role in their development as composers. Mozart's father Leopold was a fine musician and composer with court influence. Under his guidance, Mozart and his sister had already established themselves as child geniuses from an early age. Beethoven's early family life was brutal, and there are accounts of his alcoholic father being abusive. This influenced the tone of Beethoven's music and maybe even gave him the drive to create an array of brilliant music. It doesn't seem very certain to believe that Beethoven exerted musical influence over Mozart, but we can be certain that Mozart's music formed a central focus in Beethoven's formative years. Beethoven was fed a diet of Mozart from an early age, and if accounts are to be credited, Beethoven's early compositional attempts show this clearly. When Beethoven was inspired to write an appreciation of Mozart, it allowed him to break the conventions of classical music and forge a pathway into the Romantic era. One burning question that often lingers in our minds is whether Beethoven met Mozart. We know that Beethoven visited Vienna, probably with a letter of recommendation to study with Mozart, in 1787 and 1790. Beethoven's mother died of tuberculosis in July of 1787, cutting his visit to the Austrian capital short. Beethoven's 1790 visit is likely to have been when he met and played for Mozart, although accounts differ and scholars have little evidence to support the claim. It seems highly probable that Beethoven did meet Mozart and may have sought guidance. But the relationship did not last. However, the influence of Mozart's music on Beethoven did. Beethoven did not settle permanently in Vienna until a year after Mozart had died. From around 1792, Beethoven established a foothold in the Austrian capital. He was noted for his astonishing virtuosity on the piano and gradually acquired patronage from the nobility. Mozart battled this throughout his career with varying degrees of success. Now Beethoven followed the same route with the support and tutorage of Joseph Haydn, a valuable ally and mentor. Beethoven did not always refer to Haydn kindly in later years, claiming he learned nothing from the great master, but this may be an exaggeration of the truth. Like Mozart, Beethoven was a brilliant piano performer with improvisational skills that dazzled his patrons and audience. As such, Beethoven created a significant body of work for the piano, just as Mozart had done. Sonatas and concertos are at the heart of both composers' work catalogs. These have become the backbone of each composer's oeuvre, offering aspiring pianists a window into the worlds of Mozart and Beethoven. If we look into the pure quantity of work each composer produced, Mozart wins. Naturally, there is far more to these wonderful compositions than sheer quantity. Mozart composed 18 solo piano sonatas, which currently exist, whereas Beethoven boasts an impressive 32. In terms of piano concertos, Beethoven completed 5, Mozart an astonishing 27. Both composers were symphonic too. Beethoven completed 9 symphonies, while Mozart finished an astonishing 41 during his short life. Alongside these vital compositions, Mozart and Beethoven composed extensively for string quartets, quintets, concertos for violin, and choral works. Where Beethoven and Mozart differ is opera. Mozart wrote a great number of operas and was considered to be one of the most pertinent opera composers of his day. They remain key favorites even today. On the other hand, Beethoven did not find the same affinity with the operatic tradition and completed only one, Fidelio, 1804. Many would argue that Mozart encapsulated the classical era in music. His music was elegantly crafted, meticulously structured, and effortlessly accessible. Mozart transformed and defined classical music, laying the foundations for composers like Beethoven. One of the dominant forms or structures unique to the classical period is called the sonata. As the structure is embodied in classical aesthetics, it is harmonically measured around tonic and dominant key relationships. It pitted two themes against one another, each bound by character and key to the next creation. A development section that allowed the composer to explore their material with more focus was distinguished from earlier forms. In sonatas, concertos, and symphonies, Mozart showed his gifts through these, and other, forms, but what Beethoven achieved was on a different level. For Beethoven, the concept of musical development and the extension of sonata gave him a golden chance to push a classical form into the Romantic era, setting the standard for the emerging composers of the next generation. Both Mozart and Beethoven were great, influential innovators, but it often seems that what Beethoven achieved with sonata form was almost beyond what one might consider possible.